1, 2, testing, testing. Have I got your attention? Are you listening? I hope so, because that's what I want to talk about today. Welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses, where we talk about navigating the labyrinth of the mind and emerging victorious. And there is nothing more than we need to navigate, it seems, the navigating distractions, navigating the everyday pulls of our attention. And attention seems to be one of the highest commodities that there is out there. And if I can keep hold of your attention, then I've got you. And then therefore I can pull your data. I could do something with that data. I can sell it, etc., etc. And I think that no matter where we go, whether it's, unless we're out in nature, that's what's happening. Nature doesn't pull or demand anything of us, but the everyday lives in which we live seem to, whether that's, notifications pinging left, right, and center, whether that's the people that are around us, whether it's, the lifestyles that we're leading, it's pulling our attention. And this month, on the Conscious Conversations community that I run, the members voted for a theme which was being more in every day. And the reason what happens is at the end of each month, the accountability call is I offer out some suggestions of themes and then the community votes. And the reason I put that particular theme out there is because I'd had a lot of clients talking about distraction and how much it's become a prominent part of coaching conversations and different strategies. And a lot of people think that there's something wrong with them because I'm so distracted and I'm wasting time on social media, or I'm finding I can't focus when I'm having a conversation with somebody, or there's so many different things that are vying for our attention. So it's become a big part of our conversation. And one of the phrases that I noticed being used a lot was I'm a human being, not a human doing, yet I spend my life doing. The day to day is all about doing. What do I need to do next? Or even that sensation that I should be doing something, that pressure that they tend to feel. So I'd offered the title out there of being more every day, being in capital letters, for us to explore as a community, which is what we do, is to go through that theme and see what we uncover. And as ever, whenever the theme is put out there, life offers me opportunities to discover more about that topic myself, which I find both infuriating and fascinating and brilliant all at the same time. And this particular time, what it's brought to my attention is how and where am I being, and how and where am I not? And I think more than anything, it's more the having the awareness of where I'm not, in order to be able to recognize what's going on there. How am I not in this moment right here, right now? And what I've discovered for myself is the more that I practice this, the more that I become aware of if my attention has been pulled in a different direction for whatever reason, whether that's a notification that's pulled my attention, or whether that's my thinking has wandered off in some direction, or it's usually the latter. It's usually thinking that when I've done that, when I've recognized it and had an awareness of it, that then I can bring myself back into this present moment. Now, it's something that I have been practicing and deepening more within my coaching, and it's something that often gets commented on. And one of the things that gets commented on is that clients have, they've never anywhere else in their life experienced being so heard and so listened to. And I think that, yes, that is part of my role. That is what I am there to do. And I also think it's because in our everyday, we aren't interacting with people that are present. How often do you go out with somebody, regardless of who it is, and whether it's work, whether it's social, and there are devices that are visible that they're checking, whether that's watches, the smart watches, whether it's phones, it's things that are pulling their attention away from this moment. Or you go into a restaurant or a cafe or pub or bar, and you're having a conversation with somebody, but then there's the TV on, and that's pulling the flickering of the light is pulling your eyes, or it might be music that's on, or other things are distracting us. And there's so much of it that it seems like we're fighting with reality, or we're fighting with what's going on we're fighting with that chaos to attempt to experience peace or quiet. And I think very often what we then end up looking for is, if I can shut everything down outside, then I'll experience quiet on the inside. And actually, for me, what I notice is completely the opposite. The more that I practice being here, being with what is, so the sensation in my arm is now gone, for example. So therefore, if I'd have stayed distracted with that, I'd have probably been itching it, or, been thinking that then that might have led to, oh, if you're watching this on video, then you're going to think, what's wrong with her arm and why is she scratching it? And that distracts away from the content of what's being said. But when I've got an awareness of, oh, that sensation is there, it will go at some point, which it has. I recognize it doesn't need attention. And I can check, where do I want to put my attention? It's a choice that I have, and it's a practice that I need. It's not going to automatically go in the direction that is the most beneficial for me. It's going to go in the direction that it's being pulled, or where the algorithm, my internal algorithm of thinking, thinks it should go for whatever process it's running. If you've listened to the first episode of Coming to Your Senses, you'll know that in the early 2000s, I experienced a breakdown. I tried different therapies, but it was coaching that truly helped me transform my life. Initially, when I discovered coaching, though, I couldn't afford it. And it was a kind soul who sponsored me not only to have coaching, but also to train and become a coach. And my promise to them was that I would pay it forward. And I've done that in many ways over the years, initially through social media and private Facebook group called Confidence Revolution, and also through Coming to Your Senses, the podcast. But it triggered for me a passion to really want to make and create a secure, supportive space for people to be able to come together and have conversations that transform their lives. So I created the Conscious Conversations community. It's a group where we meet on more than once a month, and we have a focused theme which is guided by the community and facilitated by me. There's hundreds of hours of learning and resources and materials to help you transform your life in a like-minded space. Because I get passionate about it, and because this was my promise to pay it forward, I'm offering you the opportunity to trial it for £1 for the first month. If that appeals to you, then head to juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer. juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer to explore what's available for you through being part of a conscious community. So if I consciously choose, so in a coaching session, a one-on-one coaching session, I'm aware, for example, that things might come into my thinking, whether that is pertinent to the person that I'm working with, or whether it's something else, like what am I going to have for lunch? It could be totally random. And I have a choice in that moment to give that thought attention or not. And the more I practice this, the more I practice giving my attention back to wherever I am, whoever I'm in conversation with, whatever the conversation was in that moment. And what I notice, and it's interesting because this has started to, other people have started to feed this back to me, not that I've been looking for feedback, but they've actively been sharing that with me. And one of the things that kind of why I wanted to talk about this today was I noticed in two podcasts. One is one of the episodes that I've recorded for Coming to Your Senses, but the other one was in somebody else's podcast. And when we got to the end of it, she said something that I just hadn't got an awareness of in that moment. But what she said really struck me, which was that we'd gone into a conversation now. If you've listened back to or listened from the start, you will know in the episodes where it's just me that I will, I'm going to say expose myself, but whenever I say that, I always feel I need to qualify it with going, don't worry, I'm going to keep my clothes on. Is that exposing what's going on in my head or exposing an aspect of something that's happened in my life. And in this particular podcast episode where I was the guest and I was being interviewed, we were talking about my overdose that I took in my late 20s. And then I talked about all what led me to that, what happened when I got to that point, following that, the fallout of that, which I've spoken about on this podcast as well. I think it's episode 12, but forgive me if I've got the wrong number. Well, what I found fascinating was the person interviewing me said, I love that you hold no shame about what you experienced. And I thought that's really interesting reflection, because for me, I was being in the moment with the question that she asked. And when she asked the question, that story was the one that came to mind as the one that seemed appropriate to share in that moment. And there were a couple of other questions she then followed on with, which meant that gave me the opportunity to open up and share, well, then this and this happened, and talked about that. And she said, I love that there's no shame and that you're talking about it not from a point of blame or shame for what I experienced at that point. And what it got me thinking about was the connection between being more every day, being here, being present, and how can I carry shame? How can I be thinking in a shameless way about myself, a shameful way rather, about anything that I have or haven't done, if I'm in this moment, if I'm being right here, then is it possible for me to carry shame? And where I'm at the moment with that exploration is it doesn't seem viable. It doesn't seem that I can have shame in this moment. I can if I want to go into my imagination and I want to go into then unlocking that memory and adding a bit more spice and coulda, woulda, shoulda, then absolutely I can create the sensation of shame. Absolutely I can then go into self-flagellation, or he said, she said, or coulda, woulda, done, all of these kinds of different stories. But I have to go into a memory. I have to go into the imagination and unlock that in order to be able to experience shame. Now, until I'd had this conversation in the podcast where I was being interviewed, I hadn't seen that. I hadn't recognized how is it that I can tell that story without there being any shame. And I'm using the word shame because that's the one that was reflected back. And I think because to me, it wasn't me that actually went through that experience, which sounds weird because I know it's my experience or the experience that I had. But it seems so distant, not just from a time perspective, but it's like a completely different life of what that woman went through, that young woman went through. And I have nothing but love for that experience that led her to that point. There's no blame for anybody else that was involved, because we were all playing the roles that we could, with the scripts that we had at that point. And I'm reminded of a Tony Robbins quote, which when I first heard it, I kind of didn't sit with me particularly well. And I think a big part of that was because I wanted to hold on to blame. I wanted to hold on to shame. I wanted to hold on to judgment and self-criticism, because that's what I knew. It's what I'd done all of my life until that point. The quote that he shares that struck me is that I'm always doing the very best I can with the resources I had at that moment in time. I'm always doing the very best I can with the resources I have at that moment in time. If my thinking is caught up in victimhood, in this is awful, I'm a bad person, I'm not enough, I'm broken. If I'm caught up in any of that thinking, then I can absolutely understand the fallout of symptoms and behaviors from that, because I've only got resources that are going to associate with that thinking, with those algorithms. And it's only when I can be present to see that thinking, hear that thinking for what it is, which is thinking. That's all it is thinking. It's not who I am. Then it gives me a distance. And by having that distance, I can look at it with a far more compassionate lens. I can look at it through a far more respectful, kind, loving, considered way, even neutral to a certain degree, of recognizing that and then taking a step away from it. It doesn't mean that I then justify my behaviors and going, oh, well, I can just brush them off. But I can have an understanding of where those behaviors came from. And I think that that's why I could have the conversation that I did in the podcast where I was being interviewed and share the depth that I did of those stories without shame. And I think that the quote was something around that there was no shame. And the questions that then flew out from that was around, I wonder what life would be like if we were shame-free. Doesn't mean to say that we don't take responsibility. But if we recognize we were doing the very best with the resources we had at that moment in time, then I don't have shame for what I did, but I can have an understanding for why that behavior happened at that point. And then I can potentially look to have an awareness of it, be more present, be more in the everyday, so that I can then have an awareness when I'm not and drifting into that judgment, criticism, unkindness, disrespectful way of thinking that is going to take me down a similar path. And I wanted to share that because I genuinely hadn't realized that I have no shame around the attempt to take my life. I think that's partly why I jokingly say, I'm such a failure. I couldn't even take my own life, and I tried twice. I don't mean it as flippantly. I don't mean it to be dismissive of those who have been successful, because my best friend was successful. I don't mean it to be dismissive of those who are experiencing the loss of somebody, because I've been there with losing my best friend. I don't mean it to be dismissive of those who are still caught up in that shameful thinking at all. But what I offer out is an insight from my perspective, which doesn't make it right. It's just a perspective. And what I notice is, by being here, being, all caps, more, doesn't mean I have to do more. I just need to be here more often. That then I don't have shame about anything I did in the past. I don't have regret. I don't have guilt. And interestingly enough, I'm not sure that I'd need to double check this for myself. So I'm saying it aloud and kind of holding myself to account here. I don't think I blame either. There may still be some discomfort around some things that have happened in life, but they happened. I can't do anything about them. I can learn from them. So my invitation is twofold. Actually, it's threefold. The first one is, come and join the Conscious Conversations community, because this is where we dive much deeper into conversations like this. You get to ask your questions. We have direct conversations. And it's really cool. It's a really cool community of wonderful beings who want to support each other. My second invitation is to think about what could living a shame-free life be like for you? What could that look like for you? And also to start exploring the third thing, which is being more in every day. What could that be like? And my guess is one of the ways into experiencing that is to see where you're not in the moment, where you're lost in that massive thinking, being distracted by the everyday and what does he think and what does she think and how can I manage this and etc., and actually be here and see what that's like. Because the minimum that I'm experiencing and the minimum that clients feedback is that they are just experiencing a more easeful way of being, that life seems freer and lighter. And I think that's what most of us want. And I suspect what the world could really do with is us being more in every day so that it does become lighter for us all to be experiencing it. I'd love to know your thoughts on this subject. So please put them in the comments. Like and subscribe and even share these podcast episodes, because it's through you liking and sharing and subscribing and all of that wonderful joyous stuff and hitting notifications that I get to see and understand what it is that you want more of. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about being more in every day? What do you think about living a shame-free life? What could that be like for you? And I look forward to speaking to you again on another episode of Coming to Your Senses very soon.